We want to talk about the end of the world. So,
great.
what better time?
Peachy.
Okay, not the end of the world, just the end of California. Julian Lozos is on the line. He's a professor of geophysics at Cal State University. We've talked to him before. He's at CSU Northridge. That name Northridge might ring a bell. That's the last time there was a big quake in California. It was the Northridge Quake. Right, Julian?
Well, not the last time, but the last one that actually caused a substantial loss of life. Certainly.
Oh, yeah. There's earthquakes every day here. I mean,
yeah. That fault is directly under where I'm sitting.
Oh, how nice for you. That makes it easy to study, doesn't it? But you're not...
I do computer models. I can study people.
You're not here to talk about the Northridge quake. You're here to talk about the world-famous San Andreas Fault. Is that the San Andreas Fault you're on?
So it's not. So California has, as you said, like thousands of faults, and the San Andreas is actually it's a bit east of here. So it does not run through LA, and so the fault that caused the Northridge earthquake we didn't know about until that happened, and it has since gotten the very creative name of the Northridge Fault.
Ah. Well, that's exciting. I mean, we're learning. It's kind of scary that we're learning about faults by having them erupt. You were the one, we had you on, who discovered the Cascadian fault zone, which...
Well, I didn't discover it. I definitely have not actually discovered any faults.
Oh, I'm shocked. I'm disappointed in you. I think you're a slacker.
Models of what they might do now that they've been discovered.
Now that we know about it. The Cascadian fault was, when you were here, you scared everybody. In fact, there was a big article about it. The real hazard to the Pacific Northwest still hasn't happened, but it could any day now, so look on the bright side. We've got a new one. This field is called Paleoseismology. Is that what you are, a paleoseismologist?
I am not. I know a lot of people who are, and I kind of plunder their data. Well, maybe plunder is the wrong word because I acknowledge and cite them, but I use their data to motivate my computer models of hypothetical future earthquakes or trying to understand past earthquakes. But I certainly have many friends and colleagues who are paleoseismologists.
So it's the past as prelude to what may be to come.
Yeah, it's basically if you can understand what the fault has done in the past, then that means it's certainly something that can happen in the future. It's not to say that it's always going to happen exactly the same way, but getting an understanding of a number of past earthquakes certainly gives us a better picture of any future ones.
So I saw the article in the LA Times about a big one that could be on the horizon, so to speak, in Southern California. And this is a combination of the San Andreas Fault and the San Jacinto Fault.
Well, you've actually got two different articles up there. So this one that you have on the screen is about the San Andreas and the San Jacinto. And that paper really, so that's based on research that I did over the past year. I had the paper published in the journal Science Advances, so it's open access if anyone wants to read the paper. And so what I was looking at was an earthquake that happened in the year 1812. So there were actually two big earthquakes in Southern California. 12. The first of which is known to have affected the Inland Empire area and San Juan Capistrano in Orange County. So all of those squares on that plot, all of the orange squares represent Spanish missions that experienced either heavy damage in the case of San Juan Capistrano and San Gabriel and San Fernando to lighter damage such as in Ventura. So all those places felt this earthquake. And then the orange line on the faults is where I think the earthquake happened. Because an earthquake isn't just shaking. It is basically rupture, unzipping along a fault. So it starts somewhere and propagates. And so that map that was up there a second ago was the one about the 1812 earthquake. And so all of the other squares directly on the fault there were paleoseismic sites. And so I guess to briefly define paleoseismology, it's basically, if you think of paleontology as you're digging a hole and looking for dead stuff, in this case you're digging a hole and looking for, well, maybe not a dead earthquake, but an earthquake that already happened, because it might, if it rips through to the surface of the Earth, then that kind of thing will be visible at any former surfaces of the Earth. So yeah, what we're seeing now is an example of a rupture zipping down a fault. That's what's called the shakeout scenario, envisioning a 7.8 earthquake ripping down the entire southern San Andreas. The 1812 earthquake that I just published on was smaller than this. It's inferred to have been about a 7.5. But one thing that's super important about earthquakes is that it doesn't matter. It matters a lot less how big they are, and it matters a lot more where they are. So that Northridge earthquake that happened right here and left some cracks in the walls of what is now my office, in fact, that was a 6.7. That's not huge by the grand scheme of seismic energy, but it was under a densely populated area. So that's what you need for something to become really bad. You can have a magnitude 8 in the middle of nowhere, and it makes scientists very excited, and it might affect nobody other than the scientists. So
in 1812, LA was not exactly heavily developed. How do you have any even evidence of an 1812 earthquake? What are you looking at?
So one thing that was fun about this study is that I got to accumulate a whole bunch of different kinds of evidence to make a computer model. So I was looking at the records from the missions, who were saying, first of all, well, what did we do to make God really mad and cause this? But also then the description of what did or didn't fall down. So that's a picture of a mission that was damaged by the second 1812 earthquake, not the one that I was working on. So if you find one of San Juan Capistrano rather than, no, that's still the wrong one. So there was an earthquake There was a second earthquake in December of 1812 that was probably influenced by the first one. But you get the idea with those pictures is that the missions got damaged, and people wrote down what happened and sent it back to Spain in their reports. Yeah, that's San Juan Capistrano.
Can you infer how strong the earthquake was from just that anecdotal reporting?
You can start to get a picture of it, yeah, because the modern day intensity scale, not magnitude, but intensity, is based on how hard things shake and how much stuff breaks. And so by looking at the level of destruction described at the missions, and actually with San Juan Capistrano, they never rebuilt it. So you can still see what got knocked down. So looking at that can give you a sense of how hard it shook. And another thing we can actually look for is what's called precariously balanced rocks, which are exactly what they sound like. They're rocks that are perched on a pedestal that look like they should have been knocked over. But the fact that they haven't been knocked over means that they haven't experienced ground motion strong enough to knock them over. So then if you have these pieces of historical evidence, the positive evidence of damage from the missions, the negative evidence of strong shaking from the rocks, and then you make a computer model. So this, what we're seeing on the screen now, is that computer model of the shakeout scenario. So this was done, I think this group, this is mostly a group from USC and San Diego State that did this model, but my models are something similar. And so if you look at then the ground motion from one of those models and compare them to places where we have records of some sort of ground motion, you can start to go, okay, so this model is or isn't reasonable compared to the data that we have. In the case of 1812, again, I was comparing the ground motion data to what we know about the missions and about the precarious rocks. And then I was also comparing the model of the earthquake rupture itself. So I wasn't just looking at, assuming some rupture length. I wanted to figure out, okay, based on our best understanding of the physics of what's going on with these faults, where did the earthquake go? And so that's where the paleoseismic evidence really was an important data point, because we know that on both the San Andreas and San Jacinto faults, there is evidence for an earthquake, a large earthquake that happened in the early 1800s. And so the models I did of the physics of the earthquake were trying to see, can that work? Can rupture start on one fault and go on to the other one? Can it take that exit down the freeway, as it were? And as it turns out, it can, based on our best understanding of the physics. The San Andreas and the San Jacinto can go off together. Yeah, so here's some of my ground motion figures. That
sounds pretty horrible, actually, if they both...
So multi-fault earthquakes are not new. They've been well observed. If anyone remembers in Southern California in 1992, the Landers earthquake that ripped through the Mojave Desert on about 7 or 8 different faults. If anyone also remembers a big one offshore in Sumatra in 2012, not the one that caused the tsunami, but an 8.3 off Sumatra. That was a bunch of different faults. So having more than one fault go off at once is not unusual. But the question was, does it happen with the San Andreas? And I think it can. I think it did. The models that I did that involved both faults made a lot more sense with the patterns of damage than the ones with just one fault. So that's what I think happened.
Interesting. That's what happened in 1812.
Yeah, that's what I think happened in 1812. But if it's physically possible, then it would happen again.
If it happened once. What kind of computers do you use to simulate this? Is it a lot of data? Do you need to use a mainframe? What are you, a supercomputer?
It is it's a high-powered cluster, so it's a big super souped up Linux thing. And right now the code I'm using is not parallelized across nodes, so each node has 12 cores on the system. I did these models on the system at UC Riverside. I'm getting my own very soon, which I'm excited about.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, it's something that would make your standard desktop barf. It's a very intensive thing. They take about 36 hours to run with a model this size.
I would love to see a desktop barf. Actually, I'm very curious.
I think I just did that to your Pixel.
Oh, it's back. It's back.
Oh, good. We power washed it. When it barfs, you power wash it.
Yes.
It's all back to normal. Well, what is the lesson that we can learn from this? Is it something people should be quickly digging holes in the ground and putting up fall? I don't know. What do you do to prepare for an earthquake? It's kind of hard, isn't it?
So you can't prevent an earthquake, but what you can do is prepare for damage, because we can't know when it's going to happen. So many of people want these studies to be like, oh, so when is it happening? And the best that we can do is it's just a forecast. It's just a statistical forecast of everything we know about every fault. And so what we always say is
that's the Northridge Quake fallout.
Interchange of the 5 and the 14. So is just to be prepared in both for your house, like bolt your foundation. Certainly is if you have a house, bolt your foundation. That's even more important than having insurance. Insurance is kind of a personal decision. Bolt your foundation, strap your furniture to the wall so it doesn't fall over. Get things like, tie your cabinets, or put a lock on your cabinets, like a child-proof lock even, so they don't fly open and send your, for example, collection of pint glasses flying everywhere. Not that would be a problem in my kitchen. Or things
you don't have a collection of pint glasses? Well, we need to get you one, absolutely. I think it's just ironic that a seismologist is working at UC Northridge. You're sitting on the fault. Then your office still has the cracks from 1994.
That's cracks.
That's UC. That's the UC system right there.
That's Cal State, but there are
Cal
UCs.
State, right.
The UC Berkeley is right on the Hayward Fault.
Right. But there's nothing we can do to predict. Nothing we can do to. I mean, it could happen. It's been a while. It could happen today. It could happen in 100 years, right? I mean, there's no.
It could be at any time. So that other article that was in the news a lot lately that I had a bunch of people ask me in the last week was one that you briefly flashed on the screen earlier that said the San Andreas is, quote, locked, loaded, and ready to roll.
That's the one I was thinking of.
A lot of people like,
that was scary. Yeah.
Happen. Or should we be afraid? And this is an interesting case in that's actually like kind of a true statement, but it's been true for a long time. So what this reflects is a continued piece of understanding about the fault, that has been a really long time since there's been a large earthquake on this part of the San Andreas, and other studies suggest that it happens more often than this. So just based on knowing how often it tends to happen, and especially with the part down near the Salton Sea in Coachella Valley, it usually has an earthquake on average of every 150 to 200 years. So that's just a simple interval question. And we know that the plate is still moving. There are other earthquakes happening. But at the same time, nothing has changed to make it like it's not like we suddenly realize it's more likely than it was before. This is sort of one of those like user end things that every few years we say, hey, the San Andreas is 10 months pregnant or locked and loaded or ready to blow or whatever, and people go, well, what are you doing that's different? But it's sort of on the back end that tons and tons more science is happening. The most recent version of the forecast uses many more kinds of details and models and data points than the previous version. It still comes to that conclusion that the San Andreas is the most hazardous fault in California, in Southern California in particular. In Northern California, it's the Hayward.
I think you better be careful, Julian, because it looks like if there's an earthquake, all of those journals are going to slide off that shelf.
Yeah, my office is I'm not practicing what I preach in my
strap those journals down. Stop it. Don't knock it over. Oh, my God. It's always good to talk to you. Julian Lozos, he's just a ray of light and always positive.
Positive ray of light.
Ray of light. All the good stuff, yeah. Well, no, but it's good. We always prepare right after the earthquake. I remember in 1989, after the earthquake, everybody was running around again, get your wrench for your gas, find out where your water mains, your gas mains are, all this stuff. And of course, a year later, whatever. So it's good to remind us once in a while. Be prepared.
Hopefully people will eventually be ready before instead of deciding to get ready after.
Yeah, it's a little too late afterwards. Great to talk to you. Julian Lozos is a geophysicist, not a paleoseismologist, but he knows about this stuff too at the CSU Northridge. Thank you so much for joining us once again, Julie.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure to talk to you.
You too. Thank you.
I call him Doogie Lozos because he looks like he's about 15, but he's a smart kid, very smart kid.